Hello, curious people. It's good to have you back with me again at the Barnum Museum for another episode in our series, Curious People Wanted. My name is Adrienne Saint-Pierre, and I'm the curator here at the Barnum in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In some of our previous episodes, I've shown new old items, that is, items that have recently come into our collection. To me, it's always exciting to jump in and find out as much as I can about a new acquisition, and so I hope you enjoy hearing about them. So I'd like to do that again today with something we recently received from a family in Bridgeport, and that's this unusual round poster from the late 1800s. This is a poster promoting Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows, though it's not advertising a specific show, like there's no place or dates printed on this. So maybe we should think of it more as a vanity piece intended to be displayed within a frame like this one. Of course, being both round and with a bright orange circle, this gets your attention. And then, of course, you see the portrait of this legendary performer and American celebrity, Colonel William F. Cody. Although I have not seen another round poster just like this, I have seen other Buffalo Bill posters that use the exact same portrait of him. Buffalo Bill was famous for shows that featured lots of action and excitement, lots of horses, as the illustrations in these circular borders are depicting. And within the inner circle, we have cowboys and then Indians, and directly underneath this portrait is a picture of the famous Deadwood Line stagecoach. This was a very storied vehicle, truly hair-raising Wild West episodes, and what you might call like a cat or a coach with 9 lives. It escaped destruction on many an occasion. The coach was put to a variety of uses over the years, including carrying gold from Deadwood, South Dakota to the railroad. And that, of course, made it a prized target for attackers seeking to ambush the stagecoach and make off with the gold. I bet you know the name Calamity Jane. Her real name was Martha Canary, and she was the heroine who saved the day during one of those attacks. Well, Colonel Cody knew of this coach. Apparently, he himself had used it when he was a scout for General George Crook. And when he found out it had been abandoned after Crook's campaign against the Lakota people, that was in 1876, he decided he would acquire it. And eventually, in the 1880s, he used it in his shows. It traveled everywhere, even across the ocean. And it was a major part of his show branding. If you're wondering whether the Deadwood stagecoach still exists, the answer is yes. It is owned by the Smithsonian, but it's actually displayed at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, Wyoming. So now the outer circle here illustrates some of the other performing groups in the Wild West shows, like the Royal Irish Lancers over here, the Russian Cossacks up at the top there, the South American Gauchos here, and Mexicans down here. What I didn't find in the margin is the name of the printer or any kind of number or date to identify it, which I would expect to find on this color lithograph print. It is possible that it is hidden underneath the frame, and I would have to take it apart to find that. I mentioned finding online another poster that features this same portrait, and that one was done by the Courier Litho Company, appropriately located in Buffalo, New York. So it seems possible that this poster might also have been done by that company, using the same portrait. And that brings me to the story of where this poster was hung for many, many years. I mentioned that this and a few other items, including a portrait of Barnum, had been passed down through generations of a family in the Bridgeport area. The framed pieces that they donated had hung on the walls of their ancestors' restaurant for decades, and then when it closed, the pieces were saved by the family and passed down. Now, this establishment was located right near Barnum's Circus winter quarters in Bridgeport at 728 Railroad Avenue. It was called McKeon's, and the McKeons catered to the people who worked at the Circus winter quarters and to the employees who traveled with the circus. It almost sounds like an industrial setting, of course, with a railroad adjacent to the circus lot. As you can see in these postcards of the winter quarters, there's large buildings for equipment and animals. But this was also a neighborhood with houses that were adjacent to the area of the winter quarters. So just keep the vision of this area in your mind, and when we get to an amusing tale about the boys in the neighborhood, you'll bring that back. But first, let me tell you a bit about Pat McKeon's place. It offers a little window on daily life of working people in the late 1800s. And this is according to a Bridgeport Sunday Post article from March of 1939 about the history of McKeon's. And so the article is describing an earlier time period, like the late 1800s and early 1900s. Primarily, McKeon's was a place to eat and drink. It had a bar room and also served food. But it seems that wasn't their only role in the neighborhood. Pat McKeon also had a big iron safe in which he would keep what was called holdback money for the circus employees. Now, this article explained that the circus used to hold back a portion of money owed to the employees each week and then pay it to them in a lump sum at the end of the circus season when the circus returned to Bridgeport. This practice was said to discourage employees from leaving midway through the circus season, as well as perhaps encourage saving money. So Pat McKeon kind of acted as a savings bank for employees with all these enveloped accounts, essentially like escrow accounts that were kept inside the iron safe. What he kept in the safe amounted to several $1,000s, like $8,000 to $10,000, which was a lot of money at that time. And interestingly, it sounds like Mrs. McKeon was the one who managed these accounts when the traveling circus employees would arrive back at the end of the circus season. Since it wasn't uncommon for there to be celebratory spending sprees on drinks, she did her best to make sure that a man with the intention of getting drunk would not lose all his money, and also that he had his train ticket to home safely on him if he was not from Bridgeport. So it wasn't just a bar, it was a place where families would go to eat out, and even Charles Stratton, better known as General Tom Thumb, occasionally stopped in. Seems like the McKeons really did look out for the people, and the place was a beloved institution, was later owned by members of the Lynch family, as the McKeons and Lynches were connected through marriage. But the story I found most captivating in this Bridgeport Post article is one that ties into Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows. It's not really the kind of story that would have appeared in the newspaper at the time it happened. But this 1939 article was based on the reminiscences of people who lived in the area, describing neighborhood life in the past. As such, there isn't an exact date given as to when this incident took place, only that it was about 30 years ago. So we can say roughly around 1910. The incident was referred to as the Battle of Cottage Street, and the article starts off telling us that many a respectable businessman of today, 1939, will own up to having taken part in the famous Battle of Cottage Street, which took a whole patrol of policemen to quell. The owner of the restaurant, Lewis Lynch, related that the battle began with a minor skirmish between the crowd of boys who played in the circus lot and a group led by the two sons of the Reverend F.A. Dillingham, pastor of the First Universalist Church. Now, the Dillingham group had a clubhouse a few blocks away from the winter quarters. Well, the result of this skirmish was that the band of boys led by the Dillingham lads got the upper hand. And so the circus lot boys had to convene to figure out their next move and how they'd show them. At the time, which must have been between December and March, roughly, Bill Cody's Wild West wagons were wintering over with the Barnum show. And one or another of the boys discovered that a wagon had been left unguarded and unlocked. Well, what they found in the wagon exceeded their wildest dreams. Rifles, six-shooters, tomahawks, bowie knives, and various other weapons. Of course, all meant to depict life in the Wild West shows. So the circus lot boys armed themselves with these treasures and went racing down Cottage Street brandishing tomahawks and rifles, a scene described as something awful to behold. Needless to say, the Dillingham crowd was routed by the circus lot boys. But then they, the circus lot boys, were promptly routed by the police. Of course, the boys took off as fast as they could, clambering over the fences any way they could to keep from being caught. And in their haste to get away, all the weapons were left behind in their wake. According to Lewis Lynch, none of the boys were actually arrested, but their parents did not spare the rod, so to speak, or, as he noted in this case, the parental hairbrush was wielded vigorously in many a South End home that night. I hope you've enjoyed the stories connected to this striking poster. I love the fact that it leads us to both a local story about the Winter Quarters neighborhood and a national, even international one, the huge popularity of Wild West shows and its presence right here in Bridgeport in tandem with Barnum and Bailey's Greatest Show on Earth. Thanks for joining me. It's always a pleasure to share the stories that emerge from the Barnum Museum's collections. We'd love to have you as a subscriber to our channel, and please help us by clicking the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this program. Till next time, stay curious.